I'm Saul Djanogly, the Wealth Rabbi, and I'm going to be exploring with you this morning, is profit kosher? But before I do that, everything in life has a context. So I want to explain to you why I'm talking to you about why is profit kosher. So, Wealth Rabbi, how did it come about? My life, I've really been pursuing twin tracks, two different tracks, up till about 2008. My professional track, my career track as an investment manager and consultant in the City of London, and a second track, which is as a rabbi, a Jewish educator. That's my great passion and hobby in life. And I was pursuing these twin tracks up until 2008, but I felt a certain disconnect between them. In other words, I had one persona in the office when I was managing investments, talking to my clients, trying to make my money. And I had quite a different character when I was in shul or when I was in the Beis HaMedrash and I was talking and teaching. I almost felt like Jekyll and Hyde. And I don't know whether this resonates with any of you, that we can have different persona, we can have different personalities, and there can be a disconnect between them. To call it schizophrenia is to probably go too far. But that's how it was. I was vaguely uncomfortable with this kind of two parallel tracks, but never the twain shall meet. Until 2008, and in 2008, for various reasons, I was 46 years old. I had my midlife crisis, bang on schedule. Now, usually when middle-aged men of a certain age have a midlife crisis, it manifests itself by pursuing fast cars, sometimes even fast women, but that's not the way my symptoms presented themselves. I got into, as a response and answer to my midlife crisis, I got into an area of Jewish thought and Jewish practice, which until then I knew absolutely nothing about, and in fact I dismissed as complete mumbo-jumbo. Namely, Kabbalah, Chassidut, the application of Jewish mystical thinking to life's challenges. And it opened a new world for me. And in the last 10 years, my journey, my mission, has to take these twin tracks, wealth, rabbi, and bring them into harmony, so that they complement each other, that there isn't a disconnect. And I've developed over the last 10 years, my special interest is what I call the Kabbalah of Money. What does Jewish mysticism, what does Kabbalah, what does Chassidut have to teach us about the world of money, the world of marketplace, work, how much time and energy we have to invest in it during our lives? And today's session, is profit kosher, comes directly out of this thinking and exploration. Okay. Now, before we go into, I say my piece, because I get a little bit bored with hearing the sound of my own voice, I'm going to put the question to the room. Can I please have a show of hands? How many people think profit is kosher? Thank you. How many people think profit is treif? Unacceptable. Some way deviant. Not in line with Jewish thought or practice. I'm amazed. Oh, we've got one. Thank God. The dissenting voice. Well done. Okay. Let's have a look at it. Let's have some fun with this. Now, in answering this question, is profit kosher in typical rabbinic fashion, I'm going to ask a few other questions. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to explore what I consider to be 5 key design faults in creation. That if we were all sitting together in a room, the creation committee, we would have created the universe in quite a different fashion to the way we actually find it, and it may well be the way that we find it, might be, deeply flawed. Okay, so let's talk about design fault 1. Anybody here speak Yiddish? Anybody familiar with this word, Luftmensch? You ever heard the expression, he's a Luftmensch? A Luftmensch, Luft means air. I suppose the English translation would be that he's an airhead, or she's an airhead. What does it mean in Yiddish? A Luftmensch means somebody who wants to live on fresh air. They're not practical, they're not grounded in reality, they find it difficult to earn a living. Okay, design fault 1 is, why didn't God create us as Luftmenschen? What do I mean? Why didn't God create us in such a way that we could live off fresh air? This is a very serious question. May not have occurred to you, but think it would answer so many problems in our lives. We wouldn't have to be engaged in going out and earning our daily crust. We could just live by breathing, inhaling and exhaling. And think about how much time and energy that would free up. If the whole point of creation is for us to be mitzvahs machines, you could be engaged in mitzvahs 24/7, or at least when you're awake. So why did God create us in this way, that we're actually physically dependent on physical food and nutrition, the food chain? Anybody ever thought this question before? Okay. Now, before you say, this Djanogly, he's a heretic. What's he doing at Sinai? Indaba. This question was actually posed, and have we got any Jews here of Moroccan origin? North African origin in the room? So, Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim Boshem ben Ibn Attar, born in Morocco, then moved eventually to Israel, he addresses this question. He talks about it. And he says the answer is, and I love this, that I'm giving this in Joburg, because Joburg's a mining town. The answer is, our job is to spiritually mine. Now, I'm not going to take you through all the Hebrew here in his commentary. Bamidbar Or HaChaim is a great way of accessing Jewish mystical thinking, and it's a commentary on the Torah, and there's some wonderful golden nuggets. And what he says is, in essence, he says, well, the first answer he gives is, well, maybe the reason why God made us dependent on nutrition is because there's so many mitzvahs that are dependent on eating. Think about Jewish life without eating. Impossible. How would you make Kiddush? Kiddush on fresh air? How would you, the mitzvah of challah? All the mitzvahs, kosher, treif, it wouldn't exist. But it's a little bit of a circular argument, isn't it? I mean, surely God could have come up with some other mitzvahs for us, those which are not dependent on ingesting food. Now, this is where the gold comes. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh. What is going on is that when we eat food, not only is there physical nutrition in the food, there's also spiritual nutrients in the food. And what we're doing is called in this Kabbalistic parlance, ha'alat hanitzotzot. You are elevating the sparks of holiness that are to be found in the food. And the Jewish mystics and the Kabbalah teaches us that, believe it or not, the spiritual power that resides in food, that comes out of the earth, the mineral that goes into the vegetative, that then goes into the animal and then ends up in us, those spiritual sparks are of a higher order and have higher spiritual energy, greater spiritual energy than we humans do. And therefore, we need to go and mine for those spiritual sparks. And one of the reasons we make a bracha, we make a blessing on food, is that's a spiritual extraction process. You're able to access the sparks of holiness. Now, what's interesting about money is, of course, is gold and silver. In the Kabbalah, the taller they come, the harder they fall. Which means the deeper you have to go into the Earth's surface to access a resource, the greater the spiritual energy that is contained within. Joburg, you have to go down deep to get the gold, to get the diamonds, to get the silver. And that's why money is so powerful, as such a strong source and store of energy that we can use in our lives, because you have to mine for it. And going the deeper down you go, you're going more and more and more, and you're accessing more and more of the fallen sparks. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so now we understand why we have to eat. Now, let's move on. Design fault number 2. Why is our earning our daily crust such a struggle? Okay, God, I understand now. We have to eat. We need physical nutrition because that way we access the spiritual nutrition. But why can't it be like in the desert? For 40 years we had the manna fall from heaven. Wouldn't that make life simpler? Life wouldn't be such a hassle having to try and earn your daily bread. Why is it such a struggle? And what's really interesting is, what's the Hebrew word for war? Struggle. Milchama. What's the root of the word milchama? Do you see the word inside milchama? Lechem. Because all struggle, all wars are about a battle for resources. So God, why did you make it so tough for us? And by the way, the struggle is not only a physical struggle, but as the Hasidic masters point out here in this quote, it's also a spiritual struggle. Because every time you eat, we have the dilemma. Am I living to eat? Do we live to eat? Or do we eat to live? Is consumption the be-all and the end-all? It's very interesting. The Baba Sali points out that the Hebrew word for eating, achila, also spells Elokecha, your God. Because there are people in life, eating, consumption in general is their God. But on the other hand, you can eat in such a way, achila, that is a service, that you're eating in order to be able to serve Elokecha, your God, with greater energy and with a greater strength. Okay. So why the struggle? Okay. Now here again, I want to, forgive me God, but I'm going to criticize you again. We're all familiar with the curse coming out of the Garden of Eden. Okay, let me go back. If you're familiar with this, what I really want to concentrate is on verse 19. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. B'zeh tapecha tochal lachem. It's a curse. It's a punishment. If Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned in the garden, we'd all be in the Garden of Eden and everything would be fine and dandy. And earning a living wouldn't be such a struggle, our daily bread. Okay? Now the question I have here is, I remember once, I met an Irishman for some reason in Kentish Town, and he saw that I was Jewish and wearing a kippah, and I've got an atrocious Irish accent, so forgive me. But he said, "Your God of the Old Testament, he's so vengeful, he's so punitive." And you look at this passage, and that would seem to support it. Now the question I have for you is, this seems to me to be a spectacular divine own goal. Because again, if the whole purpose of existence and creation is for us to serve the Almighty, in order to perform his commandments, why does he throw us this curveball and punish us, and so to speak, punish himself? It's an own goal, because if he wants us to do mitzvahs and to do his will, he's punishing us by forcing us away from the exercise. What on earth is going on? So let's see. This is the interesting question. when we have what seems to be punishments, divine punishments, and that applies, by the way, to the punishments which a Beit Din, a court of Jewish law, is supposed to mete out. And, when the Sanhedrin was around in Jerusalem, and please God the Messiah will come soon, and the Sanhedrin will be restored in all its glory, they'll be able to give out, on the rare occasion, the death penalty and various other forms of mandated punishment. Are we Jews, and is God for that matter, into punishment? Or is he into correction? Is he into rehabilitation? Now in Hasidic thought, there is no such thing as divine punishment. God is not vengeful. God is not punitive. There's no such thing as punishment. It's correctional. It's correction. So therefore it follows, teach it the Hasidic masters, that the struggle to earn our daily bread is a tikkun. It's something which gives us the opportunity to put right, to correct what we got wrong. And here we have a beautiful quote from Torah Or. This is from the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he says, what happened? What was the sin of Adam and Eve? The sin of Adam and Eve is that good and evil got mixed up. Okay? We live in a kind of crazy, mixed up world. So in order to reverse that sin, to put that right, what we need to do is to be able to separate, literally, the wheat from the chaff. That's how you make bread. Everything in life, all the challenges that we face, are all about kiddush vehavdalah, sanctification and separation. And in doing this, we rectify the sin. So now we understand why, in fact, the process of earning a living is not, and earning and eating our daily crust, is not punitive. It's actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity to put right the original sin. Okay, let's move on. I know I'm moving fast. I'd like to have time to take questions if we can. Okay, so we now have this world in which we have to earn our daily bread, okay? A world of work. So the interesting thing is, again, how did God design the system that human beings have these work-stroke-economic interactions? How's the system work? So I'm going to run through it very, very, very quickly. Okay, so the question I want to ask you is, and again I'm going to put it here to a vote in the room, is God a free market capitalist? Can you please put your hands up if you think God believes in free markets? Okay. Is God a socialist? Any votes for that? Okay, good, a few votes, good, good. Is God a communist? Good, one vote, wonderful. Okay, so how did God set the system up? Now, the fundamental underlying tenet, and again it's very appropriate that we're here in South Africa, is the right to private property. Okay? It's all about, how does it work? Well, the free market's definition, you've got a system of economics, it's the free market, etc., etc. Critics say that it creates inequality, but it's all about property rights. Okay, the bedrock is property rights, and you see it up there. And it would seem the universal Noahide law, one of the 7 Noahide laws, is you shall not steal. Agreed? Now, implicit in that is the notion of private property, because if it belongs to all of us, then you ain't stealing anything. So it would seem, at first glance, that God is with the free marketeers in the room. God subscribes to the notion, the bedrock private property. But what I want to look at is it really true to say that God is into free markets, especially for us Jews, the chosen people, who seem to be so good at playing the capitalist game? So, any restrictions on free markets for Jews? So again, let's run through extremely quickly. Forbidden trades for Jews. Can I be a pork dealer? Pig farmer? The answer is no. Okay. Forbidden times for Jews. Can I work every day of the week? No, that's a restriction on the free market. What about the 7th year, the Shemitah year, where the land has to lie fallow? That creates big problems in modern agricultural economy, where with significant agricultural sector in Israel. So that's a free market restriction, okay? Another restriction, forbidden profits. You can't profit from money. You can't make profit on money by lending it to your fellow Jews. So there seem to be various checks and balances on a completely free, unadulterated capitalist market for, at least for us, Jewish people. Not for non-Jews, it's no problem. They can work on the Sabbath, they can lend money at interest, etc., etc. Okay. Now, let's talk about how markets function. One of the most important principles of law and the way markets operate is caveat emptor, which means, so the Latin means, buyer beware. What's the Jewish legal position on buyer beware? No, what's interesting is in halacha, there is the notion of the established market price, a fair market price. So, in Jewish law, there is a notion that a merchant cannot sell, and we haven't got time to go into the halachic details, but the markup from the prevailing market price should not be greater than 1/6. That's the margin that's allowed, okay? So there is an interference in the market. It's controlling margins, okay? That's when there is a clear market price, okay? For instance, on property, there's no din of, it's called ona'ah, because every property is different. Okay? But when you're buying a basic commodity like eggs or salt or bread, okay, there's an established market price. Okay, now let's talk about price and profit controls. If a person buys and sells, we've seen that, but it's what the halacha is doing is protecting from a position of ignorance. So therefore, if you approach me and you want to buy something from me which is a clearly established market price, and I say to you, be aware that I'm actually making 100% markup rather than a 1/6 markup. As long as you're aware, I've made you aware, you're not ignorant, that's fine. If you want to go ahead, you can do so. Nevertheless, what we see is, in a Jewish community, when Jewish communities were self-regulating, they could control prices, okay, but this applies only to basic commodities. Okay, let's continue. What about price fixing? That's very anti-capitalist. Well, again, what's fascinating is in Jewish law, the inhabitants of a city are permitted to establish fixed prices. Okay? And craftsmen can also, this is unionization here, early unionization. They can control the working conditions. So what's fascinating is, for those of you who voted that God is into free markets, we have to say, what would I say? He's a soft free marketeer, okay? God is a capitalist who believes in a degree of, yes, the markets are important, they're efficient, but there has to be a degree of control and intervention. Okay, there's a quote from Maimonides. Okay. Now, the problem with this system, even with all these checks and balances, is that in a capitalist society, even one where we're ticking the boxes, all the boxes, you're inevitably going to have winners and losers. Agreed? Okay, so the winners and losers. So you're going to have, at the end of the day, for various reasons, profit motive, okay, that's why you've got to have winners and losers. Work incentive, people should work harder. You've got the problem of monopoly power. Then you've got inheritance. Now that is really unfair, isn't it? Just because my daddy's got lots of money, why should I get lots of money? I didn't work for it. Okay. That creates inequality. How much wealth is inherited wealth? Okay. So this brings us on to our next design fault. Now you're all familiar, I presume, with the hidden hand of the market. Adam Smith, Basic Economics, balance between supply and demand. I'm going to introduce you to a far more significant hidden hand of the market, namely the good Lord, This is a quote here. There was a Roman matron who asked Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, great question, your God, since he created the universe, what's he been doing with all his time? Feet up on the desk? 6 days? Very busy, very intense. But after that, what's happening? To which he answered, God is busy. He's creating ladders. There are people who are climbing the ladder. There are people who are slipping down the ladder. And the quote from Shmuel is, Hashem morish uma'ashir. God is busy all day and all night determining who's going up in the world financially and who's going down. Okay? I like to think of it as a giant game of divine snakes and ladders. Going up, you're going down. Now, I think this is another design fault. As they say in Israel, זה לא fair. It's not fair. Hey, God, what are you playing at? Why? It's not fair. Why should there be people who are so enormously wealthy? Look at this country. The divide between rich and poor. It's extreme. C'est לא fair. Even within the Jewish community. C'est לא fair. Why couldn't God have created a world in which we were all equal? Everybody got their fair bit of the pie. You know what the answer is to this? Again, Djanogly, what a heretic. This question is as old as the houses, my friends. Okay? Because what God is really after is wealth redistribution. Okay, let's talk about this for a moment. Amar David HaMelech, says the Medrash. King David put this question to the Almighty. He said, "C'est lo fair." It's not fair. Why can't you create a world, okay, where everybody is equal? Why has there got to be so much injustice in the world? Answers the Almighty. Im e'aseh olami shaveh. If I make a world where everybody is equal, chesed ve'emet man yintzru'uhu. Loving kindness and the pursuit of truth, who's going to go after that? Who's going to keep it? So in other words, what we have as a divine plan where God has deliberately created inequality, deliberately created a situation where we have people who have more of the pie and less of the pie. Why? So that there should be chesed. So that there should be an opportunity for those who are more fortunate to help those who are less fortunate. Fascinating stuff. Okay, moving on. So the question I have for you. God, becoming now a socialist, isn't he? Wealth redistribution. In Jewish thought, in Jewish law, is this redistribution voluntary? It's a nice thing to do. It's a good thing to do. They might even put a plaque up on the wall for you. Okay? But it ain't mandatory. It ain't compulsory. It's up to you. God gives you the choice what to do with your money if you're extremely wealthy or prosperous even. So let's take a vote on it. Wealth distribution, God's a soft socialist. Who votes that says that it's voluntary? Okay, we've got some votes in the room for voluntary. Who says it's compulsory? Okay, so the majority have it for compulsory. Let's have a look in halakha. Now, firstly, what I want to talk to you about is, what is the Jewish word for charity? Tzedakah. Okay. The Kabbalists are very big into the roots of words. Okay, let's have a look. What's the root of the word tzedakah? Tzedek. What does tzedek mean? Righteousness. It means justice. Okay? So as far as Jewish law is concerned, charity ain't about charity. which is voluntary. It's described as the voluntary sector? No. It's about justice. And justice has to be served even on an involuntary basis. So let's have a look at the halakha. Someone who does not wish to give tzedakah, in Jewish law, the community have the right, send in the bailiffs. You've been assessed, you're prosperous, God has given you blessing, He's given you extra wealth for the express purpose of helping those who are less fortunate than you. Otherwise, He would have created a world in which we're all equal. Pay up. Redistribute. So as Chief Rabbi Sachs writes, tzedakah is not voluntary, okay? It's about social justice. Good. Let's move on. So, let's revisit our question. Is profit kosher? Now, I would think, I hope you would agree with me, that as long as you meet the various checks and balances, halachically, as long as you redistribute and you give tzedakah, okay, and as we all know, one should give 1/10 out of one's net income. We've got time to go into the laws, ideally up to 20%. But nevertheless, it would seem that with all these checks and balances, at the end of the day, profit is kosher. Hands up if you agree, on the basis of everything we've said. Okay, good. Hands up if you disagree on the basis of everything we've said. Okay, it's always dangerous when you have a consensus. Okay, so what I'm saying is, in effect, what we're talking about here is the economists talk about enlightened self-interest. The system works, it's enlightened self-interest. Okay, we know tzedakah, God in fact actually gives us a guarantee that whatever we give to charity, He will replace. Okay, and we're talking here on the macro level. This morning I'm going to be talking at the individual personal level, and if I were a rich man this afternoon. Okay, but in essence, what we're talking about is a system here of enlightened self-interest. Agreed? Okay. My question to you is enlightened self-interest, or to be a little blunter, selfishness, is that really okay? Is that really what Yiddishkeit and Torah and Gemilas Chasodim and mitzvahs is really about? Us acting as enlightened, as actors on the stage, but our motives are enlightened self-interest? Is that really all it boils down to? So let's have a look here. This, I think, is design fault 4. Okay, we have a system, but it only works because of enlightened self-interest. I'm going to make the question even starker. The rabbis refer to commerce as mekach umemkar. Okay, mekach is a word, comes out of the Hebrew word lakach. Lakach can mean buy. Okay, but it also means to take. So we talk about price takers and price givers in the market. So the system depends on taking, being a taker. That's what it's about. To lakach is to take, mekach or memkach is to sell. You've got buying and selling, giving and taking. And taking is one half of the equation. Is that really consonant with Jewish values? So here I want to talk to you, Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler says, people in life fall into 2 categories. In life, there are people who are givers, and there are people who are takers. And in life, you have to be a giver. You have to be a giver. Ask Rav Dessler in Kuntras HaChesed. How can we reconcile this with making a living or being in business? The whole point is that you want to take more than you give. That's your profit margin. Agreed? You have to be a taker to be in business. You have to be a taker even in work. You take your salary. So Rav Dessler introduces a fascinating notion, the notion of what I call the reverse profit motive. He says everything you do in business, everything you do in work is about delivering added value to the other side of the transaction. In other words, when I'm in a deal with you, my concern must not be, says Rav Dessler, how much I'm going to make. It's got to be about how much you're going to make. And I'm only allowed to charge, says Rav Dessler, a markup which is going to be sufficient for me in order to earn a living. That's all. I call it the reverse profit motive. My motive in business has been to make profit for my customers. Very interesting. But let's go even deeper. In Kabbalah and in Chassidut, there is a notion of taking in order to give. Now, here I want to quote to you. The Tanya says that when it comes to earning your livelihood, your motive should be not just to satiate yourself, just to have a better standard of living. What it's got to be is, it's got to be l'shem shamayim. The whole of your endeavor. It's not just about the reverse profit motive, about value for others, the counterparties. It's about doing good. And how do you do that good? So let's have a look. So what we see here is, he's saying, what your motive has got to be is just like God is doing chesed and doing loving kindness. Olam chesed yibaneh. God created the whole world on the principle of loving kindness. He's the ultimate manifester of loving kindness. So also when we're engaged in the marketplace, it's all about loving kindness. What's the loving kindness? Because I'm making a living. When I go into the office and make a living, my motive has got to be the redistribution piece. You've got to have the end right in mind at the beginning. In other words, I go there in order to make money, in order to redistribute that money, anything that's surplus to my requirements. And as far as my requirements are concerned, says the Tanya, the obligation to take care of my family is just one of the laws of tzedakah. In tzedakah, there's a whole list of priorities, okay? Order of who comes precedence. It just so happens my wife and my family and my kids, they're there in the law book, that they take precedence. That's the only reason why. Otherwise, I'm happy to give the money elsewhere. So it's fascinating. So the taking is all for the purpose of giving. Okay. Now, I want to end up here, because we're coming up to our last 5 minutes. The question I want to put to you is, why is the profit motive so powerful? Why did God engineer us in a way where this need to make a living and to do well for ourselves and to come out of the transaction, whether we be employees or whether we be in business for ourselves, where we want to do well, we want to make more. We want to sell, but we want to buy, and we want to have a profit. As I joked yesterday, Jews should be into the profits, not into profits. Okay? So, the interesting thing is the Kabbalists teach us that everything in this world, all the behaviors that we see in this world, everything reflects a higher and deeper reality on high. Okay? Now here, this is an interesting quote from Hayom Yom, which is a thought for the day, in the Chabad community. This is the Rebbe Rashab, okay, 3 Rebbes back. He said that what you do at night when you say the Kriya Shema is you're giving a daily accounting, so daily reports. You're reporting. You're the CFO and you're reporting to the CEO. He says, the difference though is, and the Kriya Shema that you say at night is like a confession as well. You're supposed to confess your sins. Okay? It's in miniature what you do on your deathbed. But the only difference is that at the end of the day, your trading day, and I use the word advisedly, even if you made a loss, you can get up tomorrow and go back there in the marketplace and make good, and in fact even do better. The trouble is, your trading window closes when you move on to the next world. Okay? So, design fault 5 is, let's think about this, and I'm going to finish with this. Why did God create a world where we have to come down into this world and do all this complex and complicated and difficult stuff? I would have preferred to stay in heaven. Beautiful soul, unsullied, not having to fight and resist temptation. So here the Kabbalists teach the notion of Yerida letzorech aliyah, which means you go down in order to go even higher. Or as the French like to say, reculer pour mieux sauter. When you're doing the long jump, you go back in order to jump further. So coming down in this world, the Kabbalists teach, the soul is able to achieve more than it could on high. Why? It's descent for the purpose of ascent. You've got to get your hands dirty in order to create extra added value and profit. Okay? That's what we're down here to do. And our obligation in this world, it's a big shareholder sitting upstairs. He's a risk investor. He's into high-risk investments. My business, high risk equals high reward. God says, I'm taking a big risk sending you down into this world with all its temptations. But the reward, if you get it right, boy, you've given me a return on investment far higher than with my starting capital, which was your pure soul in the abstract. So, my friends, the reason we're here is to make profits for our shareholder, for our CEO, for our chairman of the board. So my message to you, as we approach our final 2 minutes, is go out there and make profit. But it's the right kind of profit. So is profit kosher? It all depends how you define profit. Thank you so much.